It is highly likely that if you clicked on this video, you're a beginner who is looking to start out at playing chess. Well, luckily for you, you are in the exactly right place. Now, in this video, we are going to be looking at 3 very important aspects which every beginner should know. The first one being how the game can end, the second one being how the pieces move, and the third one being the special rules in chess. Without further ado, let's jump straight into the video. In chess, there are 5 main ways in which a game can end. Either by checkmate, resignation, time running out, draw by mutual agreement, or stalemate. And I'm going to show you guys exactly what these things are. First up, let's look at checkmate. Checkmate is when you trap your opponent's king so it has no legal moves because all the squares which it can go to are covered by your pieces. For example, in this position, we would want to play Queen G7 checkmate. And this is checkmate because the black king cannot go here, or to H7, or to F7. And obviously it can't go to its own square because it's already on it. And also note that the queen cannot be captured because it is defended by the king. And also let's have another little look at how checkmate can work. For example, you can see here that in this position, the rook is attacking the king, the knight is covering the F8 square, and also the rook is covering the 7th rank, just like this. The rook is covering the 7th rank, the knight is covering G8, and the rook is attacking the king. So the king has no legal moves, and therefore it is checkmate. Now, what we're going to look at as well is stalemate. And stalemate is very, very important to understand because stalemate is very, very dangerous and it can happen something like this. You may get in a position like this where black will play king h8, and stalemate is where your opponent's king is not in check but it has no legal moves, just like a position like this, where the queen is not actively giving check on the king, but because the queen is cutting off this square and this square, the king can actually not move anywhere, and this results in a draw, so you have to be very, very careful not to run into these sorts of things. Now let's talk about resignation. Resignation is where your opponent might think that their position is so dead lost that there's no point in continuing the game, and so they will just press the resign button, or if you're playing over the board, they'll offer you a handshake and say, okay, I resign, and then you win the game just like that. Similarly, a draw agreement is where you will, one of your players will offer a draw and the other player will either reject or accept the draw, and the game will end or continue based on what you decide to do. And lastly, we have timeout. It is simply where if your time runs out, you lose the game. It is as simple as that. Now, let's jump on to how the pieces move. First up, we're going to look at how the most basic pieces move. Pawns. There are 3 main things to remember with pawns. They can capture diagonally, they can move 2 squares on their first move, and they can promote to a piece when they reach the other side of the board. This is precisely what I mean. So here, the pawns always start on the 2nd and 7th ranks, and so your pawn can move 2 squares forward on its first move. And other than that, it will always have to move 1 square after that. However, for example, in a position like this, you could actually capture the piece because it is going diagonally. So the pawns can go forward 2 squares on their first moves and they can capture diagonally. But those are only 2 of the 3 things which I said earlier. What happens if it reaches the end of the board? So when the pawn reaches the end of the board, you can promote to 1 of 4 pieces. You can either promote to a knight, a bishop, a rook, or a queen. Now, most of the time, you would want to be promoting to a queen, but there are some circumstances which you wouldn't want to be doing that, but we can go through that in a later video. But the main point here is that, for example, you're in an endgame, which we're going to come across later in this video. You're going to really be using your pawns to threat to promote, and those pawns, which might seem so passive in the early game, can actually turn into such monsters in the endgame and come into queens and end up delivering checkmate for your side. So now let's jump on to how the bishops move. Next up, we have the bishop, and the bishop is a really, really simple creature. It just goes diagonally, either backwards or forwards or side to side. And the only real thing to note here with bishops is that there is 1 on the dark squared and there is 1 on the light squared. Onto the knights we go. Next up, we're going to look at many people's favorite piece, the knight. The knight is an awesome piece, and it moves in an L shape. just like so. Like this, like this, like this, and like this, and all the way around, so it will reach this square, and this square, and this square. And if the knight is in the center of the board, it can occupy 8 squares, or control 8 squares, just like this. And these knights are very, very strong in the center of the board. And also, they're very, very potent pieces. Because they move in an L shape, they're very, very difficult to sort of spot if they're going to go for certain things called forks, which I'm going to show you just now. For example, there could be a king here and a queen here. And you may be thinking, oh well, what's this got to do with anything? Well, because your knight can move in an L shape like this, it can do this, check the king, and also attack the queen at the same time. And when the king moves anywhere, you simply capture the queen, and you're winning, so it's brilliant. Yeah, they're really, really nice pieces to use, and they move in an L shape. There isn't too much to them. Next up, we have a very, very popular piece. It is called the rook. Now, the rooks are almost even more simple than bishops, because they just go literally side to side horizontally and up and down vertically. There is literally nothing more to them. They're very, very nice, and also another good thing to add is they're even stronger when connected, like this. Here is a nice example. For example, you could have a king here, and you could give checkmate here. Because the king is trapped, he cannot come here, he cannot take the rook because it's defended, and he cannot move this way because the rook would be giving it check anyway. So always remember that they're extra powerful when connected because they defend with each other and they interact with each other very, very nicely. They just move horizontally and vertically. Nothing too much to remember. Now we're on to the king. And despite its name, the king is actually a terrible piece in terms of movement. It's there to be defended. It's not there to go and attack pieces out in the open on the chessboard. The only places where the king can move is one diagonally, one side to side, or one up and down. That is literally it. And so I just like to remember a little square around my king, or a little bubble, whichever way you want to remember it. And I know that my king can move to those squares, despite it being in check. If it's in check, it can move. However, it cannot move through check or into check. Those are very, very important to note. Last but certainly not least, we have the queen, the most powerful piece on the chessboard. Now, the queen is a sort of combination of bishops and rooks because it can move anywhere horizontally, anywhere vertically, and anywhere diagonally as well. So it's very, very powerful, and it can move from this side of the chessboard to this side of the chessboard in one move, and then all the way back down and around again. It is very, very cool, and it can move miles in literally just one move. And I just like to remember it as a little combination of bishops and rooks. So that's a very, very nice way of remembering it. If you guys have any other ways, do let me know in the comments, as that can also be a nice way to teach new people as well. By special rules, I mean rules which you will need to know to play the game of chess. And there are only really 2 of them, apart from the stalemate and checkmate rules which we learned earlier. And they are castling and the very famous, as you probably know by now, en passant. Everyone's obsessed with it, why not? So, the first one we're going to go by is castling. Now, castling can be done either queenside or kingside, and I'm going to show you guys both. The first one can be done kingside, just like this. It is done by moving your king 2 squares and moving your rook past it to the square next to the king. And this is how you perform a castling kingside. Now let's have a look at how you can castle queenside. Let me quickly show you guys a position where you can just get a position where you can castle queenside very, very quickly, such as this. And now the way you castle queenside is you play king 2 over as normal, and then you're going to move your rook next to your king on the other side just as before. But here you will notice that last time you had 1 square where your king could move, but now you've got 2, and that is because your king simply started further away from the edge of this side than to this side. And so castling queenside is generally considered more aggressive, whereas castling kingside is generally considered more sort of passive, but also more safe and natural. But in some openings you will want to castle queenside, and that is what you will have to learn with each opening that you decide to play. Now let's have a little look at en passant. En passant works like this. Let's say you're playing white, and black here thinks that they can be sneaky and give you a check without you being able to capture their pawn back because it's defended by their king. Well, thankfully, the rules of chess prevent this. In this position, you can actually play pawn takes like this, and then the black pawn has to go, and you capture still diagonally, but this can only happen once the other pawn on the other team, or team opponent, or your opponent's pawn has moved 2 squares off their rank, and then you can slide in behind and capture their pawn just like that. It really comes with practice, so let me show you it once more. It's like this. They will play 2 squares forward, and then you will capture back like this. You'll capture, and the other pawn will disappear, and here you're actually just ready to make a queen, and that is how you would win the game in this case. So that is it for today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed this beginner's tutorial on chess, on how to move your pieces, on how the game ends, and on how to know the special rules. If you enjoyed or found this useful, be sure to subscribe for more chess tips and tutorials, and we will see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.